Okay, so that is the second process of our memory system. So we've talked about sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. So what happened when we successfully stored our information, our knowledge, our experience in our long-term memory? So we want to make use of this information. So this making use of all of those information, getting it back to our conscious awareness involve the last process in our memory system, which is memory retrieval. Okay, the topics that we're going to discuss in this section. So under memory retrievals, we are going to discuss about three subtopics, which are serial position effects, retrieval cues and retrieval tasks, and lastly, special case of retrieval. So first, let's discuss serial position effect. So what is serial position effect? Serial position effect is the tendency to recall the items at the beginning and at the end of a list of more readily than those in the middle. Okay, take examples that we are memorizing Quranic verses or surah. Okay, so this is not about trying to remember them, try to memorize them. This is the case whereby you have already memorized the surah, and then when you want to recite the surah back, some of us might struggle to recall everything. Okay, so from serial position effect perspective, we are going to face the issues of recalling the middles surah or ayah. Why? According to serial position effects, it is easier for us to recall surah or ayah at the beginning or at the end. Okay, because of what? Because it is readily available. Okay, example, under serial position effect, we have two sub-effects, what we call as primacy effects and recency effects. For primacy effects, we better recall for items at the beginning of a list because they rehearse more or receive more elaborate processing. Okay, and the examples of we try to memorize Quranic verses. So when we want to recite back, okay, we already memorized them. We want to recite back, we are able to recite the beginning of the ayah. Okay, however, the middle and the back at the end of the ayah, we face difficulties, or sometimes we mix it around, or we forget the middle and at the end of the ayah. Okay, the second scenario, recency effects. Better recall for items at the end because they might still be in our working memory, or simply because they were just encountered. Okay, because of what? When we try to memorize Quranic verses, okay, we rehearse more at the beginning, okay, but at the same time, when we memorize at the end of the ayah, so this is still in our working memory, or it's basically easier for us to recall them because we already have the cues, which is the beginning of the ayah. So usually, or for my case, I sometimes forget at the beginning of the ayah. Okay, if you remember, you are praying behind an imam, and then the imam forgets certain ayah. Okay, it's only take a few words or few ayah at the beginning of the surah for the imams to recall back. So this is the scenario of recency effect, whereby the middle and the end of ayah we can remember it easily, but we forget the beginning of the ayah. Okay, so this is the recency effect. So serial position effect is talk about that human beings tend to recall better beginning of the items and end of the items, but the middle of the items we tend to have difficulties in recalling those ayah. So this is serial position effect. Okay, next let's look at retrieval cues and retrieval tasks, the second subtopic or subtopic under memory retrievals. So under this, we are going to talk about three main points, which are recall and recognitions, encoding specificity, and lastly context at encoding and retrievals. All of these involved in the process of retrieving and retrieval tasks. So cues, memory retrieval cues and retrieval tasks. Cues or signs in the environment can help us retrieve memories. So retrieval cues are stimulus for remembering. Okay, stimulus for remembering. For example, if you somehow come across a person and then you don't remember, you feel like, I think I know this person, but I don't really remember his name or where I know this person. And then you walk by, you come across his car. Then you remember, oh, I know this person from the workshop, okay, from a car showroom, for example. So the car itself act as the retrieval cues for us to remember the person, okay, to remember the person. In answering exam question, for example, why sometimes students prefer MCQ, multi-choice question, because in the question itself or in the answer itself remain or contain retrieval cues. Okay, that's why students sometimes prefer MCQ questions. Okay, if effective cues are not available, we are advised to create the cues so that we can remember or recall easier or more efficient. For examples, we're going through the alphabets to remember a name or use subcategories, okay, to remember a concept, for example. So success in retrieving any information, success depends on the retrieval task. Okay, deciding whether something is familiar or remembering a name or other precise details. So we have to use, or we can use retrieval cues to successfully perform our retrieval task. Okay, so when we talk about retrieval cues and retrieval tasks, all of these are important in recalling our memories back, recalling our knowledge back, recalling back the events that have happened. So recall is a memory task in which a person must retrieve previously learned information. So we want to recall back to our conscious awareness so that we can share with other people, we can explain to our students, and we can even improve our own knowledge. Okay, for example, simple example, when we study for introduction to psychology, for example, the test is coming. So what you do, you practice yourself, you memorize the concept, you try to make yourself understand of the concepts during the exam to answer the question. So you recall what you have learned, what you have revised before. So it involves memory task, which is recall. Okay, beside recalling, another memory task that we usually do is recognition. Okay, recall and recognition. So recognition is also a type of memory task in which a person only has to identify what we have learned before. So identification here refers to, we only need to recognize what is the information, okay, what is a person, okay, what is the name. So when we talk about MCQ question just now, so in MCQ question, it's usually easier because it involves recognition rather than recalling. Okay, as on multiple choice question, because of what? Retrieval cues are available in the question or in the answers. Okay, in recognition, as compared to recalling, we recognizing a face. For example, when people ask us to identify who is this public figure, so it's far simpler than asking people to recall who are the public figures who involved in the first, in the independence of Singapore, for example, in the independence of Malaysia, for example. So recalling takes a more difficult task as compared to recognition. Okay, so when we talk about recalling, retrieving all of those information, sometimes we depends on encoding specificity principle. Okay, according to encoding specificity principle, information present at the time of encoding or at the time of learning tends to be effective as a retrieval cue. Okay, our memory might fail if the cues were encoded are not available for use. Okay, I always ask my students in class what they have learned or what they still remember from what they have learned last semester or previous semesters. And 80 to 90% of the time, students are unable to explain what they have learned in the last semesters. Even more, if I ask them what are the questions of the last semesters and what is the answers, even that they still fail to remember. Okay, so I do not blame the students. I ask them why it's become like that. Okay, so again, a lot of answers, but when we relate back the concept of encoding specificity, we actually have an explanation why people are unable to reproduce what they have learned last semesters or during last semester's final exam. Why? Because the condition, the context, the situations are not the same. Okay, most of the time, students really prepare, okay, really focus on their revisions during final exam or test or examination period. So during these times, their anxiety level is quite high. Okay, the tension that they are feeling is quite high. The time pressure is quite high. So after the final exam, this is no longer available, meaning that the tension after the final exam is no longer as intense as before the final exams. The context is different. Okay, so this unavailability of similar cues might influence a person to unable to explain what they have learned. So in order for us, based on this perspective, to make them easier to recall what they studied for their final exam, we have to create the same situation whereby they are under a little bit of time pressure and their anxiety level is a little bit higher as compared to normal person. Okay, for encoding specificity principle, information presence at the time of encoding might as well affect their recalling. Okay, look for how you study. Okay, how you memorize things. For some people, they like to use highlighter. Okay, they like to use highlighter. Okay, with yellow colors, green colors. Now we have a lot of colors, pink colors, purple colors. They like to highlight their points. So in exams, sometimes they have difficulties to recalling back what they have learned, even though they know they have read about it, they have learned about it. Why? Because the color is not present. So it does not help them to recall back. Okay. Another examples, when you study with your friends. Okay, or you study, you understand the concept of encoding specificity principle from me. So during exam or when people ask you, I'm not present, your friend is not present, so what happened? You have difficulties to recall what is encoding specificity principle. Why? Because information present at the time of encoding are not present. Okay. So this also involve other contexts or other types of cues that help or aid our recalling process. So here, when we talk about retrieval cues and retrieval tasks, we at the beginning we talk about recall and recognition, and then just now we talk about encoding specificity. Okay, what are other things that affects our recalling effectiveness and efficiency is context encoding and retrieval, or context-dependent memory. So people remember better when they attempt to recall information in the same context in which they learn it. Okay, this is the example that I just shared with you, whereby why students sometimes they have difficulties to recall what are the information, knowledge, concept that they've learned for their final exam last semesters, when the situation is no longer the same. They are no longer under time pressure. They no longer feel the stress or the anxiety when they are facing final exams. Why? Because this is not similar. So they have difficulties to recall. So if we are able to recreate again, okay, the situation where they are put under some time pressure and anxiety and some level of anxiety, so they may recall it better. So this better recollection, because people have encoded features of the context in which they learn the information along with the actual information. Okay, such features can later act as retrieval cues. Okay, that will also include some aspect of emotion. Okay, aspect of people, aspect of object that we use. So that's why they say that if you, some people giving tips, if you want to recall it better, so you have to make sure that all of the equipments that you use to study, for example, your pens, your pencils, all of your stationaries that you use in the exams, you also use it while preparing for your exam or while do your revision. Okay, so those are the first two aspects of recalling memory retrieval: serial position effects and retrieval cues and retrieval tasks. So under this subtopic, there are also special cases whereby cognitive psychologists and psychologists are interested, okay, which they talk about a lot of related issues under memory retrievals. So some of them we're going to discuss in this chapter, which are autobiographical memories, emotional memories, traumatic events, repressed memories, and eyewitness testimony. Okay, the first special case in memory retrieval is autobiographical memories. So what is autobiographical memories? I think autobiography is quite familiar with us, so whereby we put on our life history, our life events in there. So similar concepts applicable here. So autobiographical memory is a special form of episodic memory consisting of a person's recollections of their life experiences. So basically it's about our life story. So when we talk about autobiographical memory, we also come across reminiscence bump. Okay, when we have this memory in our mind, this is the phenomenon whereby adults, we are remember more events from the second and third decades of our life as compared to the other decades. Okay, say for example, currently I am 35 years old. Okay, 35 years old. So when I talk about my life events, I share it with my sons, with my children, or I share it with my students. Usually, people of this age will talk about their experience in their first decades, or sorry, in their second decade and third decade. Means that from 11 years old to 20 years old, and from 20 years old to 30 years old. Okay, why? Because according to reminiscence bump concepts, we tend to remember this even more as compared to the other events. It's obvious. Why? When we are younger in our primary school, from age of 1 to 9, for example, we barely remember what happens then, unless it's a very special events, traumatic events that we tend to remember. The rest of it, we tend to forget most of those events. So when we are in our teenage years, okay, 10 to 11 to 20 years old, this is at our peak of events because we at this time we try a lot of things. This is whereby our cognitive and physical developments are at its fastest process. So at this stage, we are growing physically and we are developing in terms of our cognitive process. And 20 to 30 years old, this is also a life-changing event where we tend to remember. Okay, so we can simply say that, oh, because you are 35 years old, of course you will remember when you were 11 to 20 and 21 to 30. But even if you talk with people who are 40-something years old, They will still talk about events when they are in teenage years and early adulthood, okay, from 11 to 29 or 30 years old. If you talk with people aged 50 years old, same again, similar pattern or trend you will notice where people talk more about the life in their teenage and early adulthood. Okay, this is what being emphasized by reminiscence bump when we talk about autobiographical memory about our own life events. So generally, the very first few years of life are not characterized by many autobiographical memories. Of course, because we don't remember when we are too young, we are still young, 4 years old, 5 years old, 3 years old, not much are happening in terms of traumatic event because at that time we are still growing up in the process of physically and cognitively growing up. So under autobiographical memories, is actually quite complex. Okay, it contains an ending string of stories and snapshots. Okay, snapshots like we are taking phones, pictures or a screenshot from our computers. So this also happening in our mind. Okay, in our memory. So all of these are unending strings of stories and snapshots can be categorized into three. Okay, into three. So our autobiographical memories can be categorized into three: lifetime periods, general events, and event-specific knowledge. So there are three types of autobiographical memories. So for the lifetime periods is basically an abstract level. Okay, for general events is basically at the middle levels. For the event-specific knowledge is basically at the concrete levels. So abstract levels for the lifetime periods. We example of it such as we remember something about our life in our high school. Okay, the example of abstract levels. For general events, it's basically at the middle levels. Okay, examples, we take a trip during our schools, going to someone's graduation ceremony, okay, our older siblings graduation ceremony. Okay, at the concrete levels, event-specific knowledge, whereby we remember in more specific details. Okay, for example, during the graduation trips, okay, we might remember first meeting our spouse. Okay, first time we experience taking aeroplane, for example. So for some people who are not regularly taking this type of transportation, they might consider it as a special event, and they remember how at the first times they are traumatic or they have a high fear towards flying and etc. Okay, so under autobiographical memories, we have three levels of or three types of memory: lifetime periods, general events, and event-specific knowledge. For lifetime periods at the abstract levels, general events at the middle levels, event-specific knowledge at the concrete levels. Okay, so we have level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 is abstract, level 2 is the middle levels, general events, and level 3 at the event-specific knowledge. So lifetime periods, general event, and event-specific knowledge. So these are the three hierarchical structure of autobiographical memory. Okay, so for a retrieval of autobiographical memories, when people share about their life event, when people tell their life stories, all these three levels of information are usually present and intertwined. Okay, the levels of lifetime periods, okay, the abstract levels, okay, the levels of general events, the middle levels, the level of event-specific knowledge, the concrete levels. When people share about their life stories, all of these are present and intertwined. Okay, sometimes it's general, sometimes it's specific, sometimes it's concrete, sometimes it's abstract. So most autobiographical memories include some reality, but at the same time, some myth. okay, because some are abstract, okay, some are very concrete. So autobiographical memories are less about facts and more about meanings. So don't talk about factual aspect when people and when you question your friend's life story. So they provide a reconstructed, embellished telling of the past that connects the past to the present. Okay, so autobiographical memories are less about facts and more about meanings. Okay, so those are about autobiographical memories. Okay, when we share or when we want to share about our life events, so it contains three types of memories: lifetime periods, general events, and event-specific knowledge, which present at three levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1, abstract level; level 2, middle levels; level 3, concrete levels. So another special case in memory retrieval is emotional memories. Okay, emotional memories. So when we remember our life experiences, the memories are often wrapped in emotion. Okay, so we attach feelings and emotion to those events. Okay, the first event that you are able to buy your first vehicles, okay, is basically feeling laden event. Okay, when you somehow experience the first death in your family members, okay, its memory is a wrap in emotion. So emotion affects the encoding and storage of memories and thus shapes the details that are retrieved. So when we traumatic events or very happy events, so we tend to remember in more details. So under emotional memories, we also always experience flashbulb memory. Okay, flashbulb memory. The memory of emotionally significant events that people often recall with more accuracy and vivid imagery than everyday events. So I've experienced death in my family life as well. So basically, you have experienced some traumatic events, some very happy event as well. So in these kind of emotional events, emotional memories, we tend to remember it more accurately as compared to other general events. This is related back to the third levels of autobiographical memories when we have event-specific knowledge at our concrete level. Okay, so beside emotional memories, I always mention about sad event, traumatic events. We also have a special case of traumatic events memory. So memories of personal trauma are emotionally arousing and are usually more accurate than memories of ordinary events. So traumatic memories can also have inaccuracies. Okay, why? Because these inaccuracies might happen because of perceptual errors, because of distortion, because of incorporation. So perceptual errors while encoding the informations might have caused inaccuracy of the traumatic memories. Distortion due to the efforts to cope or reduce the associated anxiety. So people not manipulate. People change or modify their memory because they don't want to feel the anxiety, okay, the sadness because of that traumatic events, and incorporation of others' recollection, okay, because of available cues, available situation that might happen again. So that's why we are able to, our interpretation, our memories, our encoding of that events might have inaccurate. Okay, it's not really accurate the whole effects. So stress-related hormones also play a role for traumatic events memory, such as the release of stress-related hormones signaled by amygdala and regulated by the hippocampus. So traumatic events memories of personal trauma is emotionally arousing and usually more accurate than memories of other events. However, we have to take for consideration as well sometimes these memories can also be inaccurate because of three factors: perceptual errors, distortion, and incorporation. Okay, another types of special cases in memory retrieval is repressed memory. Okay, this also related to traumatic events and might be also related to emotional memories. So repression, if you remember when we talk about the school of thoughts, the psychodynamic and psychoanalytic school of thought, okay, in the first few chapters, I think first two chapters, so you will come across this what we call as defense mechanisms. So repression is a types of defense mechanism by which a person is so traumatized by an event that he or she forgets it and then forgets the act of forgetting. Okay, things like this. Repression is we repress the memory. Okay, you have experienced something traumatic that you don't even want to admit that it's actually happened to you. Okay, so there might be a lot of examples. So some of my friends, okay, actually one of my friends conducted research on rape victims. Okay, another one conducted with victims of sexually abuse. So they are people who actually experience this very traumatic, affecting their psychological well-being and their growing up, and they develop some disorders as well. So when they try to investigate it, okay, they basically try to forget what happened to them. So they basically repress that memory. They don't even want to admit or to acknowledge that it has happened to them. So another aspect of repression is not only that they try to forget, when they are able to forget, they also forget that actually they try to forget it. Okay, I hope that I'm not confusing you because a lot of forgetting there. So they make an effort to repress this memory, to forget that event, and even the process of forgetting itself, they try to forget about it. Okay, so that is repression. So according to psychodynamic theory, repression's main function is basically to protect the individuals from threatening information because they are feel so traumatic. If they keep on thinking about it, they cannot function normally. That's why in order for them to move on, instead of acknowledging and instead of admitting, so they repress and forget about the event. So under repression, so it's highly related with motivated forgetting. Okay, a process whereby we try to forgetting what have occurred when something is so painful or anxiety laden that remembering it is intolerable. Okay, like I mentioned just now, why people repress their memory because they don't even want to acknowledge, don't even want to remember, don't even want to come across it again because it's so traumatized. Okay, so the defense mechanism of repression can be considered a special case of motivated forgetting. Okay, recovered or discovered memory are experienced as real. Okay, reports of long forgotten childhood sexual abuse cannot be categorically rejected. Why? When people trying so hard to forget, okay, sometimes through some cues, through some events, they might recover back this memory. Okay, so this is what clinical psychologists trying to do to solve this conflict so that they will be able to improve themselves, develop resiliency, so they can move on in their life. Okay, so the last special case in memory retrieval is eyewitness testimony. Okay, eyewitness testimony is basically when there are crimes, okay, people witness the event, so police or enforcement officers will take testimony from witnesses. Okay, so now this eyewitness testimony also become an interest of cognitive psychology. So memory, as we know, is not a perfect reflection of reality. Why? Because when we encode that, like I mentioned just now, they might have encoding or perceptual errors, okay, or distortion. So these might have altered the reality and create a memory, a lasting memory in a person or in a witness. So eyewitness testimony, like other sort of memories, may also contain errors. Okay, it may also contain facts and reality, but it also may contain errors. So note that witnessing a crime is often traumatic. Okay, when we talk about traumatic, if we recall back what we talked about traumatic events, so traumatic memories can also have inaccuracies. So memory can fade as well. Memory can be altered by new informations, and it also can be influenced by bias, especially racial prejudice can be a factor in bias. Okay, that's why we have to take note the importance of it. So one of the easiest way to cross-validate, okay, the validity, the accuracy of eyewitness testimony is to have multiple witnesses, okay, being asked by multiple persons in different settings, so that you can gauge, okay, the accuracy or the validity of the testimony. Okay, so those are the aspects that we need to know in memory retrieval. So in nutshell, so we've talked about three main things, which are serial position effects, retrieval cues, and retrieval tasks. And just now, we have talked about special cases of retrieval.